Okay. Just as a little side announcement, if you have a time for a few extra prayers, Bobby Stevens from Detroit is in the hospital and no visitors are allowed, and he's in critical condition, and they think it is an induced coma to give him a chance to come back. He's been in rough shape for over a week now, trying to make a comeback. All right. This is a series of talks called what?
Another additional praise for a friend in Cuenca, Ecuador.
Oh.
Enrique Guzman.
Okay.
A friend of Dr. Maluk.
Okay.
Diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And the medicals only came in a couple of weeks.
After a while, take one of those cards, computer cards, put his name on it, and I'll put it in the healing list that we have. All right, this is a series of talks called the Gospels and the Mysteries. And of course, I have to make all kinds of disclaimers first, and all kinds of explanation and clarification so that we'll get very little gospel work done. But this is not Bible study. This is the study of the Rosicrucian philosophy, which emanates from a mystery school. So we'll get to that. I'm not an expert or an authority on the Bible. I have read the entire Bible twice, and the Gospels I've read at least 20 times. And years ago, about 35 years ago, I had cancer, and when I was down with cancer, I read St. John's Gospel every day if it was possible. I do understand some of the allegories of the Bible, but I certainly don't understand all of them. I am repulsed by the Old Testament, and in some ways I consider it unfit reading material for modern people. And to be really honest, I don't like quite a bit of the Bible. The New Testament is a little bit different story, but it has its own kinds of problems. There are 4 Gospels that were accepted by early Christianity at the Second Council of Nicaea, and they're called the canonical Gospels. And the Gospels are very different from all of the rest of the New Testament. And they present all kinds of problems if you're trying to figure out where they fit into human culture. Now, most people consider the Gospels to be the story of the life of Jesus. They are about the life of Jesus, but they are not biographies of that life. If they were written by the people that they are attributed to, Luke was a doctor. Lucas, or Lucius, would be his Roman name. And he was probably capable of writing a real biography. And there were plenty of people like Flavius Josephus at the time who were capable of writing biographies, and they did write biographies. And it's clear that when you start looking at the Gospels, they're very strange things. They're not really like biographies. Another thing about the Gospels is that they are not history. There are historical things in the Gospels, but they are not meant as histories. Because if you read them that way, you're going to find all sorts of things, especially if you read them as a scholar, you're going to find all sorts of things that just don't jibe at all. the question arises when you start asking, well, if they're not biographies, and if they are not histories, what are they? Clearly, they're meant to be inspirational stories, and they're meant to help individuals to a higher life, into the new way, which is the way of Christ. The Gospels are myths. But when you say that, a lot of people get very upset by that. And you have to clarify that for mystics, a myth is not something that's untrue. A myth is something that holds a truth in it that is so high that it can't be stated in regular prose. Prosaic prose, if you like that kind of combination of words. Histories are meant to be factual. Myths are meant to be inspirational, to take you to a truth that is in facts, but that it far transcends facts. And that is what the intent is. So there are character facts, there are spiritual facts in them, but there's a lot of things in the gospel that are not so. If you take historians and look into the Gospels, there are villages that never existed. Like like Jesus went to this village or that place. If you look at them, they never were there. And there are other locations where things take place that were not places. They probably are symbolic representations of something, standing for, like the name of a town might have some spiritual meaning, but if you try to read the Gospels strictly as fact, they don't hold a lot of water. So this clearly indicates, or seems to indicate, that the Gospels are symbolic. They're not meant to be a statement like, this is the 11th of November and we are at 308 West Lakeside in Madison, Wisconsin. They're not meant to be like that. The history of the Gospels presents problems. According to the most reputed scholarship, the first written Gospel was probably not written until 30 years after the crucifixion. And the oldest fragment, which is just a little piece of a gospel that we have, was not until 70 years later. So we only know the existence of a real gospel 100 years after the crucifixion. The oldest complete manuscript that we have of any of the four Gospels is from about the 4th century A.D., 300 and something A.D. So we don't have anything before that is a whole. All of the Gospels, if you read them with literary sensitivity and do an analysis of them, all of them have indications that they have been embellished or interpolated, having things injected into them that were not there. So literally all four Gospels have been tampered with. Now, the tampering may not necessarily have been something bad. It may have been improved. Maybe they found a way to include into the mystery myth something that would be more inspiring to a certain kind of a state of consciousness. So if you're looking for a pristine gospel that was the ideal thing that was intended, you're not going to find it. And the best that you're going to be able to find is something that comes out of the ethers. And if you could read in the ethers, you might just as well read the life of Christ Jesus itself, and then get direct inspiration, and you don't need a gospel anymore. There is a consensus among all of the scholars that among the canonical gospels, St. Mark's gospel is the oldest of the 4 canonical gospels. And many gospel scholars believe that Luke and Matthew were taken from Mark, and that they built on Mark's gospel. Probably Matthew would come before Luke. Luke would have, if you take that kind of a view, which I don't, Luke would be the most watered down view. They cannot really be virtual copies, because if you look at the little vignettes that occur in the different Gospels, they aren't all the same in all of the Gospels. For example, we talked a little bit about it in the morning talk this morning, that if you look at the lineages for Joseph, Matthew's Gospel and Luke's Gospel are very different from each other. They each have a different lineage. It's generally accepted pretty much that Luke's is the youngest gospel. But when you think about it, that means it's 1,800 years old. And most people won't even read a magazine that's a month old. And there is a difficulty with dealing with relevance with something that is 1,800 years old. Now, there is eternal material in the Gospels, but to try to make them completely relevant to modern consciousness is folly. Now, beside the 4 canonical Gospels, there's a long list of other Gospels, and they keep discovering new Gospels all the time. It has only been in the last few years that they discovered the Gospel of Judas. And then there are apocryphal Gospels, which it's sort of questionable authenticity, whether they are true or not. But if you're dealing with mystery myths, that's not all bad. Some of the Gospels are from Gnostic cults, which makes them very interesting reading, and they have a lot of insights that you wouldn't find in the regular accepted Gospels. But the 4 canonical Gospels were set by the Second Council of Nicaea. Then there are agraphia. And agraphia are statements that were attributed to Christ that have been passed down for generations. You can get collections of agraphia here and there. And then there are extra-biblical collections of stories. Like when Max Heindel talks about 3 slips of wood from the tree of knowledge being taken out of the Garden of Eden, and one of them becomes the cross, and one becomes that's part of. In fact, they even had the book of a collection of those extra biblical stories. If it, I can get the title of it for you. You can still find copies of them around. So those provide very good information if you want to get a sense of the Bible as something not as an official document. There are also some rabbinical stories. I've tried for years to find them, that every now and then I find a reference to them, and they're beautiful. And they give you a sense of Judeo-Christianism that is wonderful, but they're hard, very hard to find. I searched and searched on the internet and can't find them. So, there are lots of things that are like the Bible, that are good sources of inspiration, though they are not exactly what is intended by the Gospels. So, if the Gospels are myths, and they're not biographies, and they're not history, why were they formed? And the Rosicrucian philosophy teaches outright that they are mysteries myths. That is, they are myths for initiation. Max Heindel likens the 4 Gospels to 4 different formulae for coming to initiation. The ancient mysteries were celebrated as dramas, and their effect was very much like a psychodrama or like a cosmic drama. A psychodrama is when you relive the instances of your life, but you relive them in a form that you take one of the other roles than your own role. So like if you have a rival or something like that, you relive an incident in your life with an interaction with the rival, only instead of playing yourself, you play the role of the rival. And when you do that, you get insight into yourself and you get insight into your rival in a way that is very, very insightful. A cosmic drama is when you live out a myth or a scripture. I've known people that have been psychiatric practitioners who have actually used the Gospels as cosmic dramas. I knew a woman in Los Angeles that worked in the California women's prisons putting on cosmic dramas. And they enacted one of the scenes out of St. Matthew's. Is it out of St. Matthew's where the tax collector is up in the tree? And had the worst, the most incorrigible prisoner in the prison play the part of Jesus. And the person was so uplifted that, they were inspired by playing that part. You're living out the myth. And then they redid the same scene, and this person was just somebody in the crowd, and they got into such a hassle with the person next to them trying to see the Christ when the Christ came by that they completely missed the Christ. And that was a turning point in that prisoner's life, when they could see what, if you live in a certain role, it brings things out of you. And so that is what living out a myth is like in a cosmic drama. A mysteries myth is like a cosmic drama, except it is based on a specific incident or a specific myth that is meant to lead to initiation. So it is a very powerful thing. You don't see much of mysteries dramas anymore. The anthroposophists do some of them, and the only other remnant that we have is Freemasonry. Only in Freemasonry it's become so watered down now that the new candidates for initiation into the Masons do not even act out the Masonic myth anymore. They sit there like spectators, and they have people who are skilled at acting the roles, and the Masonic myth gets acted out, and they watch as spectators. And it's no wonder that, I saw my father's life change so much to the better, and a lot of people that he knew by becoming Masons. And it was a thing of reverence to my father for having lived out those myths. And now in a lot of cases they don't do that at all anymore. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a mysteries myth. It's something that leads you to experiencing your own inner divinity. Various different mystery schools, which we are going to discuss in these talks, have used various myths. In the Eleusinian mysteries, which were celebrated outside of Athens in ancient Greece, they lived out the myth of Demeter and Persephone, and some of that's going to come along about Thursday or Friday that we talk about that. The myth of Isis, in her quest to resurrect her husband Osiris, was used for the initiation into the mysteries of Isis and Osiris, which were active well into the Middle Ages. 1,000 or so people were, even in Christian nations, people were being initiated into the mysteries of Isis. And the myth of Orpheus was used by the Orphic mysteries. That is, the mysteries that Plato and people like that went through. The myth of Bacchus or of Zagreus was used by the Dionysian mysteries. So this is something that has been for hundreds and hundreds of years a means to elevate someone's consciousness. Now, if you read hagiography, and hagiography is the study of the lives of saints, you find that a lot of saints who lived in cells actually did live out parts of the life of Christ in their inner reveries, in their prayers. They would try to live out things that were incidents in the life of Christ in various seasons of the Christian year. And so this is not something that is foreign. It's pretty much gone by these days. In regard to the more modern mysteries, like the Rosicrucian mysteries, we are certainly recommended to study the life of Christ and take it to heart and take it in our own lives, but it is not part of a Christian mystery ritual. The means of being initiated in modern times does not require a myth. The means of initiation in modern times are when myth has been turned into history, and when we relive history that we have gone through, whether it is back in the Saturn period or in the Polaris epoch or something like that. Those are all parts of unfolding elementary clairvoyance in the Rosicrucian initiation. All right, so we have a little bit, a superficial understanding of what a mysteries myth is. So now we have to turn to the mysteries themselves. In the Rosicrucian cosmoconception, the mysteries are referred to as the mercurial mysteries. This is to differentiate them from solar mysteries or other more localized mysteries. In other places in Rosicrucian literature, the mysteries are associated with Neptune. And frequently in the charts of initiates, horoscopes of initiates, Mercury-Neptune combinations have a lot to do with initiation. In fact, Uncle Rudy had that combination in his chart. Yeah. So, what? Oh, I said that Uncle Rudy had combinations of Mercury and Neptune in his chart. The Rosicrucian Christianity, in all of the major points, but not all of the detail, and in all of the theology and all of the dogma, the Rosicrucian Christianity agrees basically with Christianity in general. The Rosicrucian cosmoconception talks about a fall of humanity, which is the fall that is very vaguely symbolized in the Garden of Eden story. And it is claimed that this occurred in the Lemurian epoch, which is a period of time and not necessarily a place. And at that time, in the Lemurian epoch, we were recapitulating the work of the moon period. And in that old moon period is the time when we went through our animal-like experience in evolution. We weren't animals like our current animals, but we went through a similar state. We were misled in our innocence, but we had how would you say it? We had a trace of selfishness in us, and that trace of selfishness, even if it's only a potential, is what the Lucifers played on and brought us to our fall. And what we did is we took our portion of the divine creative force and we took it to intentional use by ourselves. And we did that in ignorance. We were both innocent and ignorant. And when we did that, we subjected ourselves to the principle of cause and consequence and sensed the divine power of creation, which is the power that creates the whole universe and transforms it. We started a new arc of descent that took us deeper and deeper into matter. We concretized ourselves and the world more than was intended. We still had a great amount of creative power, enough to eventually wreak a lot of horrible magic on each other, but so we had some potency. The long-term consequence, because when you're dealing with something very powerful, you're dealing with something very subtle. Like I can walk like this and I can turn around in one step. But if you're dealing with a jet plane, which is very powerful to turn around, it's going to take several miles. And the consequence of misusing the subtle power of creativity that was given to us, it's taken us many thousands of years to work that out. So, gradually, we lost touch with the inner spiritual worlds. And we became overly focused in the external world and in matter. But our outer sense perception still wasn't really developed. And we were sort of in a jam. Because what happens is that the Lucifer spirits had us exactly where they wanted us. We were removed from divine guidance. Because previous to what is called the fall, and our self-assertion, previously everything was given to us by the gods. Every little detail in our life was taken care of. We got exactly what we needed for our spiritual development. But the divine beings, the divine creative hierarchies, are spiritual beings. And they clearly understand that we all belong to one universal spirit. And when we belong to one universal spirit, we respect the manifestation of that one universal spirit in every other being. And when we proclaimed that we were gods, because gods are creative beings, and when we took creative force into our own hands, we were proclaiming that we were gods, out of respect, they couldn't lead us around willy-nilly anymore. They could influence us, They could influence us astrologically, or they could influence us through the way that they worked in the organs of our body and things like that. But their direct influence was taken away from them. And so we were left on our own, and we were brought to experience things the way the Lucifer spirits wanted us to experience things. They wanted us to be extremists. And in our extremism, when we were taken off the equipoise and divine balance, what happens is that they can then reap the experience from us. If we're peaceful people, they can't get any energy from us. But if there's something like a fight or something like that, the aura bursts open, they draw out energy, and they actually have the experience in such a way that the divine hierarchies can't use it. But they can, because they have guided us or steered us into that way of doing things. I've told the story a number of times when I used to ride my bicycle down along the bay over here on my way to work. The wild ducks would run into a car because they didn't understand cars. They didn't have that fallen consciousness. But if I come riding by on a bike, they would see me as a living creature, and they would take fear, and they would pull away where they wouldn't pull away from a car. That's a very light example of the difference of the kind of consciousness of the Luciferic type being represented by the automobile versus the natural type, the animal seeing a human being in a form that they can recognize. So, we experience things primarily by the first and second sins, which is the sin of Adam, sex, and the sin of Cain, violence. And right down to this day, the big trials and temptations and means of experience, we do get experience from them, even though we get harvested for that experience in ways that are not to our benefit, is through sex and violence. I think there are only 2 countries in the entire world that do not have defense, which is a misnomer, as the primary element of their budget. So, violence is a big thing, and we all know what sex does in the world. So, at any rate, the divine hierarchies could impel, but they couldn't compel. That's where we were sitting at. We haven't gotten anything in the gospel yet, and it will only be the last 5 minutes that we get to the gospel. It's an introductory kind of night, so we have to go into those things. Obviously, from all of this, we can see that massive changes were necessary. Things had to be done differently than the way they had been done before. Everything in the cosmos is accomplished through a handful of a few principles, simple principles. They get compounded on each other, and they get woven into a very deep and complicated fabric. One of the chief principles is called the principle of analogy. It is the way that unity is maintained vertically, so that there's something analogous about each of the planes, so that the oneness of the universal spirit carries through all of them. It's called the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. What has gone before in heaven will follow after on earth. Know this and rejoice. So it is by analogy that changes had to be made. Now this is something that works in our lifetimes. In a way, a day is analogous to a year. And a year is analogous to not only a day, but to a lifetime. And a lifetime is analogous to an entire revolution in any one of the periods of the creation. So everything follows this grand plan of analogy. As the Cosmo Conception calls it, it says there are spirals within spirals. So if we look at things in our lives, we should be able to understand why things were done the way they were done. In analogy, parents are like the divine hierarchies. Until a certain age, they have complete responsibility and they have complete authority. You take a child that's 8 years old, the parent's word is the last word. They have that power. But as we approach puberty, which is analogous to the Lemurian epoch, we want to assert our independence. And we try every authority. We test them all. And when it comes to a time that we are so rebellious that we doubt and we talk back, and anything that's said by our parents, we automatically disregard, try to do the opposite of it, and we are sometimes so ugly about it that our parents don't even want to exercise discipline over us. It gets like that. I can remember things, I called my mother a bitch at one time. My father, she had, and after all of that, she defended me and stood between me and my father, or I would have gotten a thrashing like never before. But at any time, in any way, we would never admit it, but we needed guidance. And we got guidance. But we didn't get it from our parents, and we certainly didn't get it from the school teachers. We got it from the kids that were a little older than us. We looked up to them. We admired them because they were, they had freedoms. They could drive the car when we couldn't and things like that. And this is analogous to what happened after the fall. It turns out that different participants in the evolutionary creation advance at different rates. Most in any group stay with a par basis. They stay all about the same speed. But there are always some that lag. And this is a mystery that I don't understand completely at all. Why some lag when we were all started as the same universal spirits and we were all innocent and virgin? Why some, even at the very early stages, lag? I don't have an answer for that. Maybe eventually it'll come to me, but I don't have an answer for that right now. And it isn't only on Earth that this happens. Taking it by authority, the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception and the adepts who are behind that teaching say that our human life wave, those of us that are in the fourth stage of evolution, is spread out throughout the solar system. And that some of us are associated with each of the planets, and we evolve with each of those planets. We're not talking about the planetary rays, we're talking about the physical planets itself. This doesn't mean that they are in hydrocarbon bodies like ours, because we know that's impossible. Physical conditions would not allow that. But it is possible to function in analogous bodies. Material science says that there's no life on other planets. But material science doesn't differentiate between life and form. The spiritual life and the intelligence that is in the form is life. The form is what is used by that life to garner experience. So according to Christian mysticism, or according to mysticism in general, it's easily possible that someone can have a vehicle of thought, that is a mind, a vehicle of motivation and emotion, which is a desire body, a vehicle of vitality and life, which is an etheric vital body, and they can have a vehicle of form, but that form does not have to be made of chemical stuff. It might even be just chemical ether. Now, because this differential in the rate of evolution, it varies throughout humanity, it took place on other planets also. The seers that formulated the Rosicrucian philosophy from their observations and cross-checkings and things like that claim that there were human laggards on Mercury and Venus also. Now, one of the beautiful things about evolution being as elastic as it is, or being as open to things, changes in the divine plan, is if somebody can lag, somebody can also go ahead of the pace. Or if you have lagged, you can catch up. And this is what happens. The teachers of the Rosicrucian Fellowship claim that the laggards from Mercury and Venus came to the earth to help us out of the fix that we were in. And we could relate to them because they were humans also, but like a couple years older than us when we were teenagers, that kind of humans. Because we could relate to them, they could teach us in the way that the divine hierarchies could not. They were seen by us almost as gods. In fact, in their advancement of intelligence and their capabilities with magical powers, they were gods to us. In fact, there are a lot of people that take it extremely literally and think that everything in mythology is gods that lived here on the surface of the earth at one time, advanced beings of one kind or another. So, their work was that by finding ways to help us catch up from where we were or get out of the mire that we were stuck in, they would advance themselves. This is a phenomenon we all recognize. If we study something and then we want to teach somebody else something, we find out we didn't know it as well as we knew it. And then when we start studying it in order to teach it, we learn it much, much better. And that is the kind of thing that accelerated the evolution of the Mercurians and the Venusians so that they could catch up with their own life wave again, with their own group. And one of the things that they did was that the Mercurians worked especially with the part of humanity that was occult. That is, the children of fire versus the children of water. And what they did is they developed the techniques for initiating people into the mysteries. And the mysteries that they initiated them into were the basic points of the evolutionary creation. The Mercurian mysteries are based on critical things that we learn and become that are built into our very being by the evolutionary creation. You cannot take a modern mystery initiation without knowing about the evolution and your part in the evolution and what powers were supposed to be brought out of you because they were built into you by the divine hierarchies in the first place. So, they helped us to initiation, and the first people who were ready, who had not lagged or fallen so much, they in turn became the hierophants for the mysteries after the Mercurians left. Oh boy, I don't want to get too far away from my notes here.
Richard, so they would appear, the Mercurians or the Venusians, in an etheric sense.
Yes.
Because we had more etheric sight.
Yes, we had etheric sight.
That's where the whole mythologies
Yes.
of the peoples came from.
Yes, they didn't inhabit bodies like this because that wasn't part of their fall. So, as Christian mystical aspirants, it's important that we don't set ourselves too much apart from the rest of the world, because we're based on the same stuff and the same principles and the same actions as the rest of the world. Now, as we work with the Mercurians and Venusians, they were able to move their evolution as they helped us with our evolution. And so the first students became the first hierophants. This is what evolution means. Evolution means not only change, it means progress, and it means improvement. The creation isn't just a rote thing that you walk through like a dress rehearsal or something like that. It is something that in the process of the creation, we are co-creators. And as we are going through the different evolutionary stages, we give ourselves to those stages. And when we do that, we are creating. It's not creating like the whole business from the beginning, but this is, we're journeymen. This is how we learn. So it's important for us as students of the Rosicrucian mysteries to understand that evolution and every principle and every goal of evolution, that it permeates our consciousness. Everything we do. Edgar Anderson does very nice talks on how we see the mysteries in our everyday life. It's clear that they have permeated his life because he can see where these things happen in his life. So even the mysteries themselves evolve. And that is the topic for all of these talks, is the evolution of the mysteries. Now we're told in the Rosicrucian philosophy that it gets more difficult as time goes on to become an initiate. And part of that is due to the fact that the evolutionary creation itself is increasing in its velocity. And it's hard to speed up faster than something that's already speeding up. Here's an analogy. Suppose you want to hop a freight train. If it's standing there, you can hop right in. Well, of course, if you do that, then the railroad cop will get you. But so you want to get on the train when it's moving. And when a train starts moving, it starts moving very slowly. You can walk right alongside of it, and then you can jump on. But as the train picks up momentum, it goes faster and faster, and it's harder to jump on. Something like that is why it's harder to jump on to the course of initiation, because it's going faster and faster all the time, and it's hard to just even keep up with it all, especially since we have this pride and we spend so much time thinking about ourselves that there's not enough time to think about doing the work, so that it becomes harder and harder to enter into the mysteries as time goes on. Max Heindel tells us that the ancient mysteries used to involve trance. In order to get someone out of the body, they had to entrance them and manipulate the vital body so that the vital body could be separated, stratified so that the higher ethers could be taken away from the lower ethers, and then the consciousness, as they brought them out of trance, they transferred the consciousness into the higher ethers, and a person was initiated and capable of functioning outside the body. It is, in the ancient initiations, it was something like somebody holds the bicycle for you as you're first riding the bicycle, and you can maintain with the other person, and then they let go, and then from there you have your sense of balance and you can go on. For the modern mysteries, you are a self-starter. You don't have somebody hold the bicycle for you. It comes from yourself. You have the balance inside of yourself to do it that way. So it was a big thing that changed all of this. And that is the incarnation of Christ as the central focus of the life spirit into the body of Jesus, and the 3 years ministry, and especially the crucifixion, changed all of this so that the modern mysteries are very different. No trance is necessary in the modern mysteries. Now, this is a really profound thing, having something that subtle and that powerful come in. In the first place, this inaugurated the beginning of the religion of the second attribute of the Godhead. That is called the Son. The second personification of the Godhead is called the Son. Before the incarnation, religion and spirituality were in the hands of the third attribute, Jehovah. And the central function of Jehovah was to break things down. Races had to be broken down into clans. Clans had to be broken down into families until there was a complete breaking down of an uncontrolled, unself-controlled connection with other beings, other human beings. That is, we had to become individuals. Part of this is alluded to by Christ when he says that I can't stay with you now, but I have to give you the Holy Ghost, meaning to say that you have to be an individual first. And when you are an individual and you are a divine creative free agent, then and only then can you choose to unite with the life spirit, and that is to unite in and with Christ. In the Lemurian epoch, everything was done by necessity. Nothing was done by choice. And so gradually, as we broke down, we're in a period right now of a very strong Holy Ghost period of history. Everybody wanting to break into separate cultures. Yugoslavia is now 4 different cultures, and there are all these little ethnic groups, and there's a revival of languages that were from a long time ago. There's a fear that we're going to lose something. That's always, when there's selfishness, there's always fear we're going to lose something. And if you have the Christ consciousness, nothing is lost. And you have it in a positive, controlled, volitional way. But at any rate, we were broken down into several different groups. But people advanced, or there were advanced people that were reborn into these different groups, and they were ready for initiation. So, each society, each racial group, each clan had its own initiation. So there were mysteries. They were usually called lunar mysteries as opposed to the solar mysteries, which are the Christian mysteries. So there had to be new mysteries in order to accommodate the new religion. And the new religion was a conscious choosing of the universal selfness of which all of our individual selves are in, where we intentionally care about the other. We intentionally give to the other, which is what the religion of the Christ is. Because as long as there is a selfish self-control, we can't progress into the religion of the Christ. So, this is what the new mysteries are all about. Now we see this in a snippet from the 2nd chapter of St. Matthew's Gospel. It's a good example of a passage that means much, much more than people really believe it does. It's like that with the mysteries. We're going to find that all week. There are certain peculiar things in the Bible that seem kind of crazy, and they don't fit in. And they're like that cornerstone that doesn't fit in anywhere, but is key to everything. In the 2nd chapter of Matthew, 3 wise men follow a star from the east in order to honor the new spiritual king. The east is the past. It's where the sun was before it got here. Here, where the sun is now, is the present. The 3 wise men were magi. And that means they were capable, like any initiates, especially if they're deep initiates and teachers, they were capable of manipulating the finer forces of nature. But that doesn't mean that they don't make mistakes. And the first mistake was assuming that the new king would be in the center of the kingdom, that is, Jerusalem. And they go there first, and the new king isn't there. This is the kind of thing that always happens to us. We make assumptions, and we think, you just told that story. I'm going up to the northeast, and when I get there, I'm going to join this commune group, and when you got there, you found out it wasn't, what you assumed it was. So, they eventually find their error, and they go back to following the star, which we'll have a lot to talk about. The next 2.25 days in the morning, we're going to be talking about the star. Because it's astrology talk, so you talk about the stars, right? But at any rate, they find the newborn child, and they honor the child by giving it gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, most people think that's it. They gave them something very precious, and they gave something that was to honor this new king. But in pre-Christian times, initiation was a rather tricky matter, and it involved that trance. Plato tells us that before a person was initiated, they didn't know what was going to happen if they turned them loose in the desire world. So what they would do is they'd get the individual drunk, and they'd present the drunken person with all kinds of trials. Probably a sexual temptation or a temptation to violence or something like that, like a bar fight or something of that nature. And they watched the candidate very much, because they figured if the candidate did pretty well when drunk, chances are that when they took him out of the body, they would do well. The Pythagoreans were mathematicians, and they measured every part of the body very carefully, and they looked for certain proportions, because they felt that a person who was ready for initiation would have a classical archetypal body, and therefore they would have certain proportions, and with those proportions they could tell whether this person was ready for initiation. But when it came to the initiation, various things were done. In some schools, they took frankincense, and they didn't use it as an incense. They took goat's milk, and they boiled the goat's milk, and they put frankincense in it, and they gave it to the candidate. And this had the effect of loosening up the connection of the the vital body to the physical body. In fact, people who were going to be initiated, they were born into castes like the Levites, so that just from their breeding, they had a loose physical connection between the physical and vital body. But the frankincense helped that. It was consumed. On the other hand, myrrh, which was usually used as some kind of a balm, myrrh was used as an incense, and it had the same effect. And when you have a young candidate, because they try to press people as quickly as is safely, they try to press them to initiation because the harvest is plentiful and the laborers are few. Meaning to say that we need a lot of help. This is why, seeking for initiation is not a selfish matter. Like, wow, I'm going to have all the joys of the spiritual worlds. It's a matter that, the barn's on fire. We need people to pass buckets. And so they choose people, the soul material in the vital body isn't always a lot. It's marginal. So sometimes a burst of energy is needed. And the common vehicle for transducing energy out of the ethers into the physical etheric where it can be used is gold. In fact, there are many cases recorded of people being in disc-like things, levitating themselves with the energy that they can transduce out of the ethers.
Richard, just quickly, is that why the Egyptian pharaohs, who many of whom were initiates, had gold in the chambers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thinking of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, when the gifts of the Magi are given to the Christ in the mystery myth, this means a giving over of the ancient ways. We do not need the ancient ways anymore. Now we can be initiated without a ceremony, without any special physical things to get you out of the body. So this is a simple example, but it's exactly the example that we want, because in all of these talks we're going to talk about how ancient mysteries are found in the Gospels. And when you find them in the Gospels, you see that they have been Christified, that they have a new meaning in Christianity, and Christianity isn't a separation from the ancient mysteries. It has swallowed them alive and kicking and took them and evolved them as spiritual vehicles. So that's basically the idea of what all these talks are about. These talks are going to be about the new way. And this is Christ is not only the new way, it is the way of newness. And if we are Christian mystical aspirants to that initiation, we must see everything. We have to have that childlike thing where we see everything as new all the time. And we have to look at each other that way. If we look at each other as we get in a rut and say, he's doing his thing again, instead of seeing something new and helping that person, that's what the intent is. Behold, I make all things new is what the book of Revelation says. The Christ figure in the book of Revelation, and the book of Revelation is a book of initiation. All right. For now, we'll close with the Rosicrucian student's prayer. O God, increase our love for Thee, so that we may serve Thee better from day to day. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer.
You said twice that the first Gospels were 1,800 years ago. I think you meant 1,600.
No, 18. If they were the first, the first complete one, but the first writing down of it was about between 100 and 200 years after Christ. Yeah. So, yes.
Richard, the Master Jesus has not reincarnated, correct?
Not that I don't have that kind of knowledge, but
The Bible says that the hierophants of the Rosicrucians, the elder brothers of the Rosicrucians, are guarding Jesus' etheric body in the earth.
But he also says that he has a makeshift body that he uses, that he put together. He was so adept that when he handed his vital body over to the Christ, that he was capable of making a makeshift one on his own that you could live a few thousand years with. It's silly for people like us, ordinary human beings, to talk about.
From the 60s, that's far out.
Yeah.
Oh, man, no kidding.
Yeah.
It's the best kind.
Yes.
If some of the writers of the Gospels were apostles, like Matthew, how could he have written this 200 years after he was alive? Or are you saying that he wrote things when he was alive, but it didn't all get put together into one piece until later?
In the interim, it was an oral tradition. The first known, and even according to the oral tradition, the first known was 100 years after that it was written down for the first time. Again, you're dealing with something very sketchy when you're dealing with tradition.
So that could account for why there are similar things in the different Gospels.
Well, no, I think what you would say from a mysteries perspective is that we have all gone through basically the same evolutionary creation, and we all have basically the same things built into us. Therefore, if we are initiated into taking those things that are built into us and turning them into divine creative powers, it's going to be fairly simple. Even though we have had different experiences in our, and we each belong to a different one of the seven rays, there's going to be similarities between all of them, because we're working with the same stuff. Yes.
Pretty early you said that we fell farther than it was intended into matter. Yeah.
Not only
it wasn't how it happened, so it must have been intended. Is that not?
No, we're co-creators, and we can make the path different. We're limited in how much we can do, but all of the viable clairvoyance that I've read, and just recently I've been reading that Jakob Bema, and Jakob Bema says the very same. He's really intense about that. He says we were not supposed to be in this kind of a heavy, clunky body at all. It was never intended, but we made it that way. We forced the cosmos to be that way.
Okay. So that question, we didn't have a whole lot of free will there. We were more involuntary.
Yes.
To blame.
We didn't have to fall for our own selfishness. We may not have had as much free will as we have now, but we had enough flexibility and facility so that we could change the direction of things.
Yeah, but wouldn't Dana say even by our own mistakes, God realizes?
Oh, certainly.
God gets a self-realization.
Yes, it certainly is. If we take redemption, it's going to be so much better for us, and it's going to be so much better for the cosmos. But it's not clear that everyone's going to take redemption. And so that it is a matter of, we may, if we are fortunate enough to pass through this, we may become magnificent beings, but not everybody will be along with us. And that's, it's sort of like a camaraderie. It's sort of like a road trip or something like that. If you lose somebody along the way, it's a big loss. And because each individual has a unique viewpoint of the entire creation, and losing somebody along the way is like putting together a jigsaw puzzle and having one piece missing, and that really galls you because you're missing something that's essential for the whole picture to make sense.
I mean, aren't the apes and the monkeys stragglers? Some of them.
Yeah, but the apes, not the monkeys, but the apes.
They will have a chance.
Yes, and some of them may even catch up. It's very hard for us as human beings to say, oh, that person's not going to make it, because that we don't have that kind of insight. And there may be some, you take any animal, take something like a buffalo, it's not going to do very well going through a marsh. But when it gets out of the other side of the marsh, it might suddenly take off and go fast. And there are maybe people that are lagging now that when the conditions change, they'll catch fire and move ahead more swiftly.
And the group spirit of an animal that gets extinct still transmutes into another form, right?
Yeah, so they evolve too. The group spirits are evolving.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, nothing is lost.
Yeah, it must have been a major change when all the dinosaurs went out. It must have been a major change in consciousness for the divine hierarchies. For me, it's very hard to fathom something that is that major as a change of the way things are done. Julie's getting tired already. So,
no, I'm not getting tired.
Okay, looking at it.
In the New Testament it says that Jesus is the shepherd, and if even one sheep is lost, he'll just leave the whole flock and go after it.
Yes. But to a certain extent, we are saved through Christ, but we have to allow ourselves to be saved. This gets really tricky in some denominations where they deal with theology rather than a direct spiritual philosophy. There are some people that believe that if you're going to be saved, you're pre-elected, you're saved already. But if you go to hell, it's your own fault. There are actually people that believe that way.
Richard, when will this be resolved when we're in the kingdom of the Father?
I can't even talk about the kingdom of the Father. That's so far beyond my comprehension. I have seen some things by two of the very late Neoplatonists, Syrianus and I forget but they have descriptions. It was called the last of the Neoplatonists. He's referred to as, what is the capital of Syria? What is the capital of Syria? Damascus was considered the last of the Neoplatonists, and he has descriptions that are amazingly clear to give you some idea of what consciousness of the Father is like, even though they said you can't know that directly. But there are some intimations of it that are just marvelous. Yeah.
This is a little off the subject, but you mentioned that Jehovah breaks things down towards individuality. Mm-hmm. And in that process that breaks things into countries, clans, races, but that process actually pushes away from individuality.
No, if you read the Bible very carefully, when it's talking to David, that one country is being brought to clash against the other country, and that sometimes you just get sick of war, and you begin to respect your enemy. And when those things are inklings of what it is like to break away from the group and not be tied into it that strongly. So the clashing does do that. It's We have draft dodgers now. And as far as I'm concerned, I think draft dodgers are in the vanguard of humanity. There are people who don't want to go to war anymore. They're sick of it. They see no purpose to it. In fact, quoting Muhammad Ali, no Vietnamese ever did anything to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.